cars. For most Americans, these four-wheeled vehicles are the dominant mode of transportation. We depend on cars to get us from place to place each and every day.
It's true. Americans do a lot of driving, especially in cars and trucks like this one that have a gas engine, which, if we're getting technical, is called an internal combustion engine vehicle. However, there's a new kid on the block in the automotive world, one that does not require an expensive weekly trip to the gas station. See, as people started to get tired of high gas prices, tailpipe emissions, and noisy gas engines, they decided to branch out and take advantage of modern technology so they can create a better method to powering cars.
So you may be wondering, what is an electric vehicle? Are they good? Are they bad? Should I get one? Well, let's find out.
Driving this road down to paradise, letting the sunlight into my eyes. Our only plan is to improvise, and it's crystal clear that I don't ever want it to end. If I had my way, I would never leave. Keep building these random memories, turning our days into melodies.
Truth be told, there isn't exactly anything revolutionary happening quite yet, but electric vehicles, or EVs for short, are rising in popularity all over the world. In fact, North America saw a 100% increase in EV sales in 2021 and another 50% increase in 2022. Car manufacturers all over the world are replacing their gas-fueled models with all-electric ones. And world governments, including our own, are passing legislation to further the implementation of electric vehicles. With that in mind, my goal today is to break down the basics, offer some insight, and maybe teach you guys a thing or two about this new technology. So you may be wondering, what is an electric car? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not this. Ah, there we go. Now, as the name may suggest, it is in fact a vehicle powered by electricity. And while there's many different types of electric vehicles, I'm going to be focusing primarily on battery electric vehicles, like this one here, which is charged by a battery and powered by an electric motor. Here we have the electric 2023 Genesis GV60. Now on the outside, it doesn't actually look that different from other cars. In fact, right here is its gas-powered counterpart, the Genesis GV70. Aside from some discrete styling changes, the only real difference between the two, on the outside at least, is that the electric one doesn't have an exhaust. Now, while they may look pretty similar on the outside, they're actually very different on the inside. This one is powered by a V6 twin-turbo gasoline-fed engine. And this one, well, it's powered by nothing. Just kidding. Now, there might not be an engine under the hood, but there's actually a couple hundred pounds of batteries up underneath the vehicle that provide power to the electric motors. But one of the big advantages to owning an electric car is the fact that you can just pull it into your house, park it, plug it in, go to bed and wake up with a car that's fully charged and ready to go. This one in particular can get around 270 miles on a full charge, which is pretty good. Now, on top of the convenience of always having a full tank, charging your vehicle with electricity is actually much cheaper than gasoline, and will end up saving you thousands of dollars per year. Although, EV charging stations are not nearly as prevalent as gas stations, and they're pretty scarce in more rural areas of the country. So it takes some pretty careful planning and consideration to make sure you don't end up stuck on the side of the highway with a dead battery in this thing. So I'd say, for road trips, the gas one's better. Anyway, let's take it for a drive. Now, compared to other EVs on the road, the Genesis is pretty luxurious, but at its core, it's still an electric vehicle, and a lot of the features are the same. One of those features, and probably the most noticeable driving an EV, is that they're almost completely quiet. Take a listen. So, this is good for two reasons. First, it makes for a very calm, quiet, luxurious driving experience. I mean, I could sit here all day long and just smooth acceleration. Second, it helps reduce noise pollution. As we know, roads and highways are pretty noisy and loud with all the gas cars and their exhausts. So, in theory, the more electric vehicles we have, the quieter our roads become. Although, the silent nature of EVs makes them very difficult for pedestrians and cyclists to detect. And as such, a study from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the United States found, quote, electric cars are up to 35% more likely to run over a pedestrian and 57% more likely with respect to a cyclist. As far as driving goes, EVs are pretty nice. I mean, they're quiet, smooth, pretty luxurious. Oh, did I mention? They're freaking fast.
How fast? Well, that figure was surely not tested by Evan that day, but the internet says it takes the Genesis GV60, a mid-size SUV, only 3.7 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour, which is very, very fast.
This brings us to another key difference between electric and gas cars, and that is the performance. You see, that Genesis was not even labeled as a sports SUV or a sports car, but it could still make it to 60 miles an hour just as quick as many modern gas sports cars. So, in order to get a better idea of electric vehicle performance, let's do a side-by-side comparison of two epic sports sedans, one electric and one gas. So first, we've got the electric Tesla Model 3 Performance, which makes 455 horsepower and 475 foot-pounds of torque. Over here, we've got the gas-powered twin-turbo V6 Audi RS5, which makes 444 horsepower and 443 foot-pounds of torque. So aside from being silent, there are a few major differences between how electric vehicles drive. The first being a phenomenon that we call instantaneous torque. This means that in the Tesla, when I step on the gas, I have access to all of the power immediately. There's no power curve and there's no gears to shift through. And as such, electric vehicles have very quick 0 to 60 mile per hour times and can reach high speeds rapidly. In the Audi, however, we still have plenty of power, but we must rev up the engine in order to use it. And like in any gas car, when I rev the engine, the RPMs increase, the gears shift, and the car will accelerate. So another key aspect of vehicle performance is how well they can handle turns and curves. Now the Tesla has all of its weight evenly distributed along the bottom of the car with the batteries and the electric motor, and thus it has a very low center of gravity, which improves traction and handling. Now, don't get me wrong, this Audi can still hold its own through turns, but since all of the weight of the car is at the front with the engine and transmission, it has to fight a little bit harder against physics. So one more cool difference between these two and how you drive them is the braking. Now, in the Audi, just like any other car, when you want to brake, you hit the brake pedal, you stop. In the Tesla, however, it's actually easier than that. Using a feature called regenerative braking, when you let off the gas pedal, it automatically slows the car down and uses that energy to charge the battery. Alright, now I know everyone is probably wondering, which is faster, electric or gas? Well, that's a loaded question. There's not really a straightforward answer. If you're looking only at top speed, electric cars aren't even close to touching the records set by brands such as Bugatti and Koenigsegg. But in terms of acceleration in 0 to 60 times, EVs are quite dominant. If we're looking strictly at these two cars, the first thing to know is that both of them will go much faster than you'll ever need. The Audi has an electronically limited top speed of about 155 miles per hour, and the Tesla can do about 160. So if these cars were to do a drag race, which we have not tested, the Tesla would definitely be first off the line, and probably stay ahead for about a quarter mile or so, and then the Audi would take the lead and never look back. In general, this is the dynamic between electric sports cars and gas sports cars in today's market. It's important to know, however, that EVs tend to have a much better bang for the buck. Brand new, this Tesla starts at around $55,000, while the Audi is closer to $80,000. So let's review. Electric cars are quicker off the line, they have instant power, no gear shifts, a lower center of gravity, and they're usually a little bit cheaper. Gas, on the other hand, is faster overall because it's got a power curve and different gears for different RPMs. Plus, it can be a bit more responsive to drive. Although, at the end of the day, it's really just a matter of preference. Although, for me personally, nothing quite beats the sweet sound of an internal combustion engine. Let's do a little rev comparison first. So, we've looked at a small sedan with a Tesla and a small SUV with a Genesis. But what about something bigger? Well, I'm here with a 2023 electric Rivian R1S, and it's a full-size SUV. So the great thing about this SUV is that we don't sacrifice any of the features we get in smaller electric cars. We still have 320 miles of range on a full charge. We still have that nice, smooth, quiet ride, and we still have plenty of performance. But we do get a whole lot more. So where the Rivian really shines is in the amount of space that you gain. Unlike a gas car, there's no engine under the hood, and there's no bulky differential, transmission, drive shaft, or other underbody components that take up space. Instead, you've got a nice, even distribution of batteries and an electric motor on each wheel that provides power. So let's see just how much space we gain. First, we've got a massive frunk, or front trunk, which is perfect for putting any large items that you don't want stolen because nobody can see inside. Plus, on this one, there's a drainage system, so if you want to put some ice in there, you've got a cooler. Alright, let's have a look at the trunk. So like any vehicle, you've got your standard, space here with the third row. This one's got a few extra features. First, tow hooks for tightening down any big objects, and an onboard air compressor. Pretty neat. And of course, under here, you got a little bit of space. Let's see you want a little bit more. You can fold these seats down and double your cargo capacity. But if that's still not enough, with these buttons here, you can fold the second row seats down and unlock even more storage. One last thing. If you lift this up and take this out, we'll find another large storage space, which is perfect for either a spare tire or extra stuff. Now, just because we have a lot of space does not mean we're lacking on the inside. We've got a huge, roomy, spacious interior with up to 7 people. Now, we've also got a whole lot of nice, fancy technology, including this massive touchscreen, which does just about anything you want it to. It even has an app that pairs to your smartphone, which you can control the AC, the heat, you can see where your car is, on location, etc., etc. It's pretty fancy. So as we've seen, electric cars are pretty good at maximizing interior space and cargo space. But you'd think for a vehicle this big that it's lacking on performance. That's where you'd be wrong. So believe it or not, this vehicle actually has 835 horsepower and 900 foot-pounds of torque. That's enough to get it from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.1 seconds and reach an electronically limited top speed of 125 miles per hour. That's impressive. Now, for the purpose of off-road driving, maneuverability, or high-speed performance, those are pretty good numbers. But when you consider the fact that this Rivian weighs over 3 tons, it's a bit dangerous. Anyway, let's take a look at one more type of vehicle, the electric truck. So this here is a 2023 Ford F-150 Lightning. And as the name may suggest, it's basically just an electrified Ford F-150. So while this may look just like a normal F-150, there's actually a few outer differences, such as this fancy light bar, solid grille, these futuristic looking wheels, and there's no exhaust. But as we know, when we pop the hood, there's no engine. Instead, we're met with this massive frunk, which has actually a bunch of cool features, including outlets, lighting, and some extra storage space. Plus, this one is actually big enough to sit in, which makes it perfect for tailgating or front gating. However, for most people looking to buy a truck, they're more concerned about things such as payload and towing capacity. And this, unfortunately, is where electric trucks have a bit of a pitfall. You see, this truck can still haul or tow just about as much as any other gasoline truck, but doing so is detrimental to the range of the battery. This vehicle is rated for about 300 miles on a full charge, which is not bad as far as EVs go. Although, when towing, this number can be reduced to less than 100 miles. And for people looking to tow trailers, campers, or boats out into the wilderness, the lack of range and charging stations will make it nearly impossible to do this without being stranded on the side of the road. Aside from that though, electric trucks do offer some pretty stellar performance. This one has 580 horsepower, 775 foot-pounds of torque, and can reach 60 miles per hour in just about 4 seconds. making it great for daily commuting or off-road adventures. But just like the Rivian, this thing is heavy, weighing in at almost 6,500 pounds. That's almost 2,000 pounds heavier than a standard gasoline F-150. This seems to be a common trend between electric and gas cars. EVs have more power, more torque, and a lot more weight. And as they become more and more prominent, the roads will become less and less safe. At this point, you're probably wondering, Evan, why do you keep saying this? How do EVs make the road less safe? And what does their weight have to do with it? Wouldn't that make them safer? Well, to demonstrate this, let's do a little bit of science. First, I'm gonna have my mom run into me from a light jog. All right, go for it. That wasn't so bad, right? Think about that like a crash between your car and an average-sized gas car traveling at normal speeds. The risk of severe injury or death is very, very low. Okay, now to demonstrate a crash between your car and a big, heavy EV, I'm gonna have my brother run at me from a full speed. Okay, go for it. Oh! Okay, yeah, that hurt a lot more. But why? Well, basically, according to the laws of physics, the more mass and more speed you have, the bigger impact you get. And as far as we've seen, for the most part, electric cars have a lot more mass and a lot more speed. This means that if they do get into an accident, the likelihood of severe injury or death is very high for the other person. In fact, a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that, quote, being hit by a vehicle that is 1,000 pounds heavier results in a 47% increase in the baseline fatality probability. So, the idea that any old Joe Schmo can just waltz in and purchase a vehicle such as the electric Hummer, which weighs nearly 10,000 pounds and has 1,000 horsepower, is rather alarming. Especially since the vehicles we drive typically only weigh between 3,000 and 5,000 pounds. On top of that, having a vehicle that is capable of high speed and acceleration is a big responsibility and takes a lot of self-control. But as EVs normalize high horsepower vehicles, the same distracted and reckless drivers on the road today will just be replacing their small economy cars with high speed, heavyweight EVs. Now, unfortunately, electric cars really aren't going to be getting lighter or slower anytime soon. We all want cars that have a lot of range, high towing capacity, and plenty of power, so manufacturers really have no choice but to keep pushing out heavier and heavier cars. For these reasons, as EVs grow in popularity and become more prevalent, you will become statistically less safe in the event of an accident, since you'll be more likely to be getting into a crash that involves a vehicle that is much heavier than yours and will be traveling at much higher speeds. So while we're on the topic of safety, let's talk about fire. Over the last few years, as EVs have risen in popularity, the media has led people to believe that they are this flaming death traps that can explode at any second. Well, this is not true. Believe it or not, electric vehicles are actually less likely to catch fire than a standard gas vehicle. However, there are a few things to keep in mind when regarding EV fires. First, there is always a risk that an electric vehicle will catch fire while it's being charged. And since it is very common for people to charge their electric vehicles in their garage or driveway, there's always potential for a very devastating fire. Second, EV fires burn hot, almost 3 times hotter than gas car fires. They also burn for much longer and are very difficult to put out. So difficult, in fact, that many fire departments have been advised to just stand back and let them burn. Now, I'll come back to the fact that it is still very rare for an electric vehicle to catch fire. But if you own one, it's definitely good to know the risks so that you can take steps towards mitigating danger. Okay, so we've covered the majority of the pros and cons of electric cars regarding to how they drive and operate. Although, probably the most talked about thing when regarding electric vehicles is their benefits to the environment. But the question remains, are electric vehicles actually better for the environment than a traditional gas engine? Well, I figured this topic would be best discussed somewhere a little bit more natural than my front yard, as pretty as it might be. So let's go to Utah.
Westbound and down, 18-wheeler rolling. Are we gonna do what they say can't be done? We've got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm westbound, just watch old bandit run. Keep your foot hard on the pedal, son, never mind them brakes. Let it all hang out, cause we got a run to make. The boys are thirsty in Atlanta, and there's beer in Texarkana, and we'll bring it back no matter what it takes. Westbound and down, 18-wheeler rolling. Are we gonna do what they say can't be done? We've got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm westbound, just watch old bandit run.
Okay, so the first thing to understand about electric cars and the environment is that they produce zero tailpipe emissions. As I mentioned earlier, electric cars don't actually have an exhaust. This is because, since there's no fuel being burned within the vehicle to create power, there's no harmful gases being emitted into the air. So in this regard, EVs are actually very beneficial to the environment. Exhaust fumes from internal combustion cars pollute the air around them, worsen air quality, and impact human health. Plus, the last thing we want to do is mess up a view like this. So while this might be a win for EVs, the bigger concern we have in general for vehicles and the environment is how much greenhouse gases they're producing. As we know, there are initiatives being set in place all over the world that are trying to reduce the amount of CO2 we put into the atmosphere. And unfortunately, electric vehicles aren't even anywhere close to being completely carbon neutral, zero emissions, or green and clean like you might think. So let's do a comparison of the total life cycle carbon emissions between gas and electric cars. Now, this will include everything from the production of the car, assembly, the charging up, the fueling up, driving, whatever it might be. So believe it or not, the actual production and assembly of electric cars requires 80% more carbon emissions than gas cars. So that means before you even take your EV onto the road, you're starting way ahead of gas cars in terms of how much carbon they've put out. And this is largely due to the amount of minerals it requires to build electric vehicle batteries. But I'll talk about that later. So once you actually hit the road driving, your EV is actually still going to keep producing carbon dioxide. But how? Didn't I just say that EVs have zero tailpipe emissions? That's still true, but in order to charge up your vehicle, you have to get electricity from somewhere. And in America, that somewhere tends to be about 60% of the time from coal or natural gas. So this is crucial to understand. So long as the electricity we use to plug in and charge our EVs is coming from sources like coal or natural gas, we are still creating carbon emissions, there's still air pollution happening, it's just not coming right from the exhaust. So the good news is, electric power plants, which take this coal and natural gas and turn it into electricity, are much more efficient in this process than gas engines are at using gasoline to create power for vehicles. So the relationship between the two looks like this, where electric vehicles start off their lives with a lot more carbon emissions due to their production, and then grow slowly over time since these power plants are very efficient. Gas cars, on the other hand, start their emissions life cycle lower, but then grow quickly because, again, gas engines are very inefficient and use up a lot of fuel and put out a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. The problem with this is, depending which electric car and which gas car you're comparing, it could be 2 months or 2 years before the EV becomes better for the environment than the gas car. This is also greatly changed by where you are in the world, what source your electricity comes from, and how many miles you put on your vehicle. It's also important to consider that if you put enough miles on your electric vehicle, the battery is going to need replaced. Doing so will create a massive bump in your life cycle emissions because batteries and their production are very taxing on the environment. Plus, no matter if you're comparing electric or gas, it's always going to be much better for the environment to buy used. This is because you won't have to factor in all of the carbon emissions that come from the production and assembly of these vehicles. So if you're wondering whether driving electric is more environmentally friendly for you as an individual, you'll have to consider some of those factors I just mentioned. So if you live in the desert, where your electricity might come from solar panels, and you buy a small, efficient car and don't put very many miles on it, then yes, electricity will definitely be better for you. But if you live somewhere where coal or natural gas is the primary source of electricity, and you buy a large, inefficient SUV and put lots of miles on it, you'll find that it might not be so good for the environment. Anyway, I'm back home now, so let's talk about the big picture. First, shockingly enough, the cars and trucks we drive every day account for less than 10% of global carbon emissions. And American cars and trucks specifically are even less than that. Second, even though electric vehicles as a whole have a smaller carbon footprint than gas vehicles, due to the factors I just mentioned, they're only better by a small margin on average. This means that even if we were all driving electric vehicles, which will not be possible anytime soon, we would only see a very, very small decrease in global carbon emissions. Therefore, when we're weighing out all the pros and cons of electric cars and whether or not we should implement them as a society, it's important to consider that there is only a very small decrease in carbon emissions on the line. We also must decide whether or not there are more worthy causes to pursue. For instance, electricity and heat production are the #1 leading cause of CO2 emissions worldwide. This might be a much better initiative to focus on, especially since EV benefits are largely limited by the continued use of fossil fuels in this area. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about one final problem with electric vehicles, but unfortunately, this one's pretty serious. So as I've mentioned a few times, electric vehicle battery production is very taxing on the environment and contributes to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. However, the negative impacts don't stop there. EV batteries are mostly made from minerals such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, and manganese, which need to be mined from the earth. Now obviously, mining has been around for a very long time, and here in America, we can do it very safely. But a lot of these minerals are not found in first world countries with strong infrastructure and OSHA regulations. Instead, they are found in third world countries such as Chile, Guinea, Gabon, Indonesia, and the Congo, places with very corrupt governments that will stop at nothing to prosper off of these precious materials. As a result, what we're dealing with here is both an environmental disaster and a human rights crisis. In order to truly grasp the horrors of the situation, I highly suggest looking into this book, Cobalt Red by Siddharth Kara, so that you can get a better idea of what's really happening in mines in places such as the Congo. But if you just try to imagine hundreds of thousands of people, including young, innocent children, who spend their lives mining the earth for a highly toxic mineral with their bare hands for only a few dollars per day, no further explanation should be needed. This just happens to be one of the ugly truths about electric cars. And unfortunately, as the demand for EVs and their mineral-rich batteries increase, this problem will only get worse and worse. Okay, I just gave you all a ton of information. Sorry if you were bored, there's just a lot to say. But if you want a main takeaway for this whole thing, here it is. Electric cars are very good at being cars. Like anything though, they have their downfalls, but so do gas cars. Whether or not you want to own and drive an EV is completely up to you. For some people, they might work great with their lifestyle, others not so much. However, when we are considering replacing internal combustion vehicles with electric vehicles entirely, we must really consider whether or not we will be doing more harm than good. It is my hope that after watching this, you all will be able to formulate some of your own opinions about this topic and be prepared for the future, because it really is up to us to decide whether or not that future should be electric. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below, maybe even a comment, and share the video with your friends. Till then, I'll see you in the next one.
So there you have it, the good, the bad, and the ugly of electric vehicles.